WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.
I'm Kyle Long, host of Cultural Manifesto, just one of the local music programs you can enjoy on WFYI. These programs would not be possible without your financial support. And to say thank you, we want to send you to see Lyle Lovett when he comes to Indianapolis on July 28th. Choose a concert ticket as your gift when you donate at wfyi.org/give. And thanks for supporting WFYI.
What we're gonna do right here is go back, way back into time.
This is Butch Slaughter, and you're listening to the echoes of Indiana Avenue. Welcome to my neighborhood, the Avenue. I grew up here, and each week I'll be sharing the sounds and stories of the people that made the Avenue great. Welcome back to the Avenue. During the 20th century, many African-American musicians found greater interest and opportunity for their work in Europe. Some African-American artists also found greater freedom in Europe as they sought an escape from the Jim Crow racism of the United States. Notable African-American musicians who spent significant time living and working in Europe include Quincy Jones, Dexter Gordon, Bud Powell, and Sidney Bechet. Many musicians connected to the Avenue also found a home and opportunity in Europe. On this week's show, we'll listen to music and interviews from that time musicians who lived and worked in Europe, including Slide Hampton, Paul Weeden, Charles Tyler, Claudia Polley, and more. We'll start this week's show with the vocalist George Chandler. George spent his teenage years singing at the Mount Vernon Baptist Church in Hallville. In the mid-1960s, he was drafted into the military. George was stationed in Italy, where he formed a successful R&B band, and he would go on to co-create one of the biggest European dance hits of the 1990s. WFYI's Kyle Long spoke with George Chandler last year. Let's join their conversation.
And George, you mentioned you weren't involved in singing R&B music during your time in Indianapolis, but in the mid-'60s, you moved to Italy, and you end up joining an R&B group called the Four Kents. What sequence of events caused this change in your life?
When I was 21, I got drafted into the Army. That was during the build-up for the Vietnam War. But I was fortunate. Instead of going to Vietnam, I was stationed in Italy. And because I've been singing all my life, I still wanted to sing. But I knew that the guys in the Army, they didn't want to hear gospel. They wanted to hear R&B, Temptations, Four Tops, you know. And so that's what I did. I formed a group. I met guys. It took me about 6 months to form this group, because by that time I knew that to form a group you have to have a certain kinds of guys, personalities have to mix as well as the singing. And we formed a group. And me and those guys now are still like brothers. We still see each other once a year. We have reunions. And this has been going on since the 70s.
No tempo poi il treno ormai. Poco fa deciso, poi andare a casa. Questa sera ho ricevuto una lettera. Non importa quanti soldi devo spendere. Voglio partire al più presto. Oh, questa sera ho ricevuto una lettera. Il mio amore mi ha scritto che non vive più se non torno da lei.
The group had a lot of success. You made a lot of records. You were actually singing soul music in Italian on some of these records. Tell me about that. Was that an unusual thing for you at the time, or was that something you jumped into with the enthusiasm?
Well, we actually had no choice, and that was a learning experience as well, because we did most of the songs that we did were cover versions, but they were done, written in Italian, and so we had to learn to sing in Italian, which was helpful in learning to speak Italian and learning to understand Italian as well. And it was all great. But later on, toward the end of our career, the record company allowed us to do an album of our own songs. But we didn't do it as the Four Kents. We did it as a group called
Sage.
Oh God, I can't.
Sage.
Yeah. Called Sage.
Yeah, I love that record. I wanted to ask you about that. That's an incredible album, and that's all your original music on that record?
That's right. That was the chance they gave us to finally, sing our own stuff, our own music, and not do any covers. And I'm still, to this day, I'm very proud of that album.
A tiny decorated neon lighted street, it still goes on. Yeah, yeah, yeah. In a square. All this mine, no one cares. But people don't care.
Eventually you get involved with this project, London Beat, and make one of the biggest dance records of all time. I mean, I grew up in the 90s, and your song with London Beat was just like constantly being played when I was a kid. How did you join this group, and what was it like to create this monumental hit record that's still everywhere today? It's still played all the time.
Well, when I was doing backing vocals, we did it. It was the guys in who eventually became London Beat, Jimmy Chambers and Jimmy Helms. And then in 1984, Paul Young asked us to join him and go do backing vocals with him on his and tour with him. And we went out on the road with Paul Young from December of 1984 until I think March of 86, we were with Paul Young. And we sit down and we talked. We said, oh, this is nice, ain't it? Why don't we put something together since we kind of know how this thing worked now? And that's what happened. We decided that we was going to put together a group. And with the advance that we got from the recording contract, we used that to buy recording equipment. And we put the recording equipment in what used to be my son's bedroom. And we made all our records in my son's bedroom.
Wow.
We did 3 albums.
We must have been stone crazy when we thought we were just friends. 'Cause I miss you, baby. And I've got those feelings again. I guess I'm all confused about you. I feel so in love, oh baby. What can I do? I've been thinking about you. I've been thinking about you.
What are you doing today? Are you still making music? Are you still out there singing in the studio or performing live?
Absolutely not. I am not singing. I retired in 1992. And I have been, as they say, sitting on my behind since 1992. I do exactly what I want to do. And what I like is music, and I like listening to music. And I like history. And that's what I do. I'm very lucky. I realize that. I had, Kyle, for a job, the thing that I enjoyed doing the most. And I remember the first time, the first big paycheck I got, royalty statement, I started crying. And the guys asked me, "Why are you crying, man?" I said, "I'm crying because I would have done it for nothing. Because I had for a job the thing that I enjoy doing the most." And it brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it sometimes. I'll be 80 years old next year.
Thank you so much for taking time to share your extraordinary history in Indianapolis and outside of Indianapolis with us. I think it's incredible that you've taken these things that you learned at Mount Vernon Baptist Church in Hawville and just taken this worldwide and influenced people in ways that I think you would have found hard to believe when you were a kid out in Hawville.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts you want to share with the listeners here in Indianapolis, George?
Thank you for being my school.
Yeah.
That was vocalist George Chandler discussing his work with London Beat. On this week's show, we're exploring the work of Avenue musicians in Europe. Up next, we'll listen to a track George recorded with the Four Kents during his time in Italy.
Giro di notte per non pensare a te. Dove sono i miei miei? Perché sono tanto solo. Oh yeah.
That was the Naptown vocalist George Chandler performing with the Italian R&B quartet, the Four Kents. On this week's show, we're exploring the work of Avenue musicians in Europe. Up next, we'll listen to music from The Presidents, a legendary Naptown R&B band that performed on the Avenue during the 1960s. In 1969, the Presidents exported the Naptown sound to Europe for a tour of Spain. While in Spain, the Presidents formed a partnership with the Spanish songwriter Manuel Alejandro. During their time in Europe, the Presidents recorded 2 songs with Alejandro, and we'll hear both of those tracks now. This is the Presidents with Ave Maria and For Your Sake and Mine. That was the Presidents with For Your Sake and Mine, recorded in Spain in 1969. On this week's show, we're exploring the work of Avenue musicians in Europe. Up next, we'll hear music from the legendary Avenue trombonist Slide Hampton. Slide spent nearly a decade living in Europe from the late 1960s to the late 1970s. Slide recorded several albums in Europe, including A Day in Copenhagen, a 1969 LP recorded in Denmark with Dexter Gordon. We'll listen to a track from that album now. This is Dexter Gordon and Slide Hampton with A Day in Vienna. That was Dexter Gordon and Slide Hampton with A Day in Vienna. Echoes of Indiana Avenue will return after this short break.
WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.
This is Butch Slaughter, and you're listening to the Echoes of Indiana Avenue. On this week's show, we're exploring the work of Avenue musicians in Europe. During the 20th century, many African-American musicians relocated to Europe, where they found greater opportunity and an escape from the Jim Crow racism of the United States. The Indianapolis jazz guitarist Paul Weeden came to prominence alongside Wes Montgomery. Weeden had a successful career in the American jazz scene, performing and recording with artists such as Sonny Stitt, Don Patterson, and Eddie Lockjaw Davis. In the early 1970s, Weeden relocated to Europe, living in Oslo, Norway, until his death in 2011. Up next, we'll listen to a track from Weeden's time in Norway. From 1974, this is Paul Weeden performing the Freddie Hubbard classic, First Light. That was Paul Weeden with First Light, recorded in Norway in 1974. On this week's show, we're exploring the work of Avenue musicians in Europe. Up next, we'll hear from Claudia Polley, a classically trained Indianapolis vocalist who became a disco star in France during the 1970s. Claudia recalled her time in Europe during a 2023 interview with WFYI's Kyle Long.
I was singing classical music, but it was also the time of disco, and somebody said, "Oh, here you are, a black singer. You must sing gospel music, don't you?" And I went, "No." Well, they said, "Come sing this, see if you can do this." So I walked into a studio, and I can read anything. So I started doing popular French music and backups because I've been trained. I was a trained musician. You can listen and sing and extrapolate what needs to be extrapolated.
It's a funky sound of a sexy sex. Play it. It's a funky sex. It's a sexy sound. Swing it. You're a funky freaky guy with a sexy sex. You give your love and you take it back.
So that's how I got into le disco.
You really were embedded in the French disco scene of the late 70s, right?
Yeah.
Not only were you frequently doing session work as a backup vocalist, but you also made a series of singles under your own name, some in French, some in English, some compositions you had written, some material that you'd been given by producers, I assume.
Right.
Tell us about your kind of entryway into becoming a star performer of the French disco scene.
Again, being in the right place at the right time and having the ability to adapt. So my voice was not, I was not loose enough when I first started doing disco music to sing fairly carefree. I could read anything, but I don't know that I had the confidence to just walk into a studio and say, oh, yeah, I can do that. Just play me something and I can riff on that. No, I didn't. And so it took me a minute to do that. And the producers were generally nice enough to give me some time to work it through. Yeah, it was just the right time. But I could always dance. And so being able to move gave me the feeling of disco, and I loved disco since it had first appeared on the scene. So now I got to sing it.
I may be a forgotten girl who wandered off at 21. It's sad to find myself at home when you're not around. If I could only hold your hand and say I'm sorry, yes I am. I'm sure you really understand. Where are you now?
I'm curious what you make of some of these records now. I mean, they're all over the map. Some of them are really great musically. They're really great and hold up very well. And then there were some like novelty records I think you made. I think you co-wrote a song, I'm in Love with John Travolta, or something along those lines. You made you were part of an Elvis tribute disco album. Does any of this ring a bell?
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. You have done your research. And as I said, ring a bell. That's right. It does ring a bell. Yeah, it was the French. The French are the French. I mean, what else do you need to say? But they were trying everything. They were trying to create their own, not only Gloria Gaynor, but Donna Summer, and the group that was ultimately my producers wanted me to sing like Donna Summer and sing like a French singer, and it wasn't really my voice, and I rebelled a bit because that's the nature of me. But we did do some interesting stuff, and always musically we did great stuff. And the orchestra arranger was a great friend, an American, and he provided some wonderful stuff. We're still friends today. So I never could be Donna Summer, but I could do other things and just had a great time. And my daughter arrived in France at the age of 3, and so we would go out, and I would be doing a gig, and Amanda would go with me, and she became known as a disco princess. I was a disco queen, and she was a disco princess, Princess Disco. So, and she could dance even better than I could. So it was a hit. She was a hit.
Yeah, and as I said, a lot of the music is really great and holds up very well. Are you proud of these records? How do you where does this lay in your sort of life's legacy and history?
Well, I certainly am proud of the work that I did. I certainly go back and go, oh my goodness, couldn't I have done that better? Probably, but that's what I did at that time, and I'm lucky enough to still be able to find some of the things that did, and have wonderful people like you to remind me of things, because it's like, whoa, yes, that's right, I did that.
I'm curious how, because you have a very serious professional side to your life. I'm curious how many people in the professional world know you were a European disco star in the 70s.
I'm staggered. Not a lot. I guess people don't Google me when they meet me. But when you Google me, I mean, that's what comes up first. Yes. And here she is doing Vient de dire rien, and or Tous les bateaux, which is the one that got the most play. But I did backgrounds on a number of disco productions that are really pretty kind of cool.
Yeah, it's incredible. The music is incredible. I love disco and funk music. And I was just blown away when I heard them. So I love that you have that history.
Wow, you were doing that? And I went, I was doing that. And it was paying for, because the one thing in France, if you are expensive, then obviously you're very good. So I was expensive.
That was vocalist Claudia Polley discussing her work in the French disco scene. Up next, we'll listen to a track Claudia recorded during her time in France. That was the Indianapolis vocalist Claudia Polley performing All the Boats, All the Birds, recorded in France in 1978. We've been exploring the work of Avenue musicians in Europe, and we'll end this week's show with music from saxophonist Charles Tyler. Tyler lived in Naptown during the 1950s and 60s. He's best known for his work in avant-garde jazz, and Tyler found a receptive audience for his music in Europe. He relocated to Stockholm, Sweden in the early 1980s and remained in Europe until his death in 1992. Up next, we'll listen to a pair of tracks Tyler recorded in Europe. Life Can Be So Beautiful and Just Me Luck.
Life can be so beautiful for everyone who plays their own role.
That's all the time we have for this week. Thanks for tuning in for this exploration of Avenue musicians who lived and worked in Europe. You can meet me here on the Avenue again next week, same time, same place. And you can find the Echoes of Indiana Avenue podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you download your podcast. Echoes of Indiana Avenue is written and produced by Kyle Long and hosted and co-produced by me, Herman Butch Slaughter.
Nobody knows on uptown, baby, like I do. Nobody knows on uptown, baby, like I do. If you would stop listen, I will tell you a thing or two.
WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.